So good evening, everyone, and you're all very welcome to the Religious Education webinar. The title of this evening's webinar is Exploring the Research-Rich Classroom in Religious Education. The overarching purpose of this webinar is to support RE teachers in understanding the rationale for and the role of the three distinct elements of inquiry, exploration, and reflection and action, and how these elements can evolve in the research-rich classroom. So my name is Niall Mulpeter and I'm a full-time advisor with Junior Cycle for Teachers, and I'm joining you this evening from County Kildare. My fellow colleagues Keith Young is joining us from County Dublin and Micheál Scully from the heart of the Midlands in Portlaoise, and our team leader for Religious Education, Dr. Eilish Travers, is joining us from the Northwest in Sligo. We, like everyone else, are adjusting to working from home in these tentative times, so if we do encounter any technical difficulties throughout this evening's webinar, please bear with us. On a technical note, please be aware that the sound quality of the webinar may be affected by the strength of your internet signal. So if you experience any difficulties, please note that the full recording of this webinar will be uploaded to the RE section of JCT under the elective CPD supports. As we commence this evening's webinar, we should just attend to some quick housekeeping to ensure that our participants can fully engage with the webinar. If you've joined us for previous webinars, you will be aware that we encourage interaction throughout the course of the webinar. So if you'd like to ask a question or comment on the webinar, please feel free to post the questions or responses under the question tab on the right-hand side of your screen if you're using a desktop or a laptop computer. If you're using a mobile or tablet, you may see a question mark icon on the top or bottom of your screen to submit questions or comments. So we will be pausing at various points throughout tonight to give you the opportunity to answer questions and to share your experiences with us as well. If you think of any questions after the webinar, or you're watching a recorded version of this webinar, you can email info@jct.ie, marked for the attention of the RE team with any additional questions you may have. When we were preparing for this webinar in design, we kept in mind the frequently asked questions that we had from teachers, so hopefully many of your questions will be addressed organically throughout the course of the webinar. You will also notice that there is a handout tab where we've included 4 handouts for you. We will look at one of these during the webinar, but please feel free to download them and save them, so you can also get them on our website under the resources tab. So our learning intentions for today's webinar are as follows. We're firstly going to explore the elements of inquiry, exploration, and reflection and action, and how they can come to life in the RE classroom. And we're also going to develop our understanding of research in junior cycle religious education specification. So the key documents that have framed our design for this evening are the RE specification and the RE assessment guidelines. The religious education specification clearly outlines how we're going to approach the subject. It identifies the learning outcomes, strands, the elements, and guides teachers in approaching the subject. Whereas the RE assessment guidelines give us a clear insight as to how we can implement the 2 classroom-based assessments in our class and the assessment task. These 2 go-to documents are the ones that you'll need to be familiar with when implementing the specification. We're now going to have the opportunity just to reflect on the religious education specification and some of the key messages that we highlighted in last year's professional learning experiences. Through exploring our specification, we can see that there are 3 strands: expressing beliefs, exploring questions, and living our values. There are 31 learning outcomes across the strands, and the 3 elements of inquiry, exploration, and reflection and action underpin the learning outcomes. We build units of learning by picking learning outcomes from across the strands. When approaching the learning outcomes, we should keep the following in mind. They should be approached in a non-linear fashion. The learning outcomes are integrated throughout the strands, and the learning outcomes should be incremental. So they're approached over a 3-year period and will not be fully complete until the end of the student's 3-year cycle. We're just going to take a moment to look at the 3 elements. These elements describe both the sets of skills and the approach to learning that are important for religious education. So the first element is inquiry. In order for us to incorporate the elements into teaching and learning, we need to provide opportunities for our students to inquire. The element of inquiry focuses on stimulating students' curiosity and prompting their engagement in a topic or question. Through a process of inquiry, students engage with a range of stimulus to uncover ideas, facts, information, images and perspectives related to the topic or question. The second of these elements is exploration. Exploration requires students to examine a topic or a question in detail, probing, discussing, listening, imagining, interpreting, and drawing conclusions for the purpose of discovery. It also focuses on encouraging dialogue and appreciation of diversity of interpretations and responses that may exist. And the third element is reflection and action. This element focuses on students reflecting on what they have learned and their own experience of and/or response to the topic. It encourages students to examine what they have learned in order to gain a deeper insight and understanding, but it also enables students to consider how the learning relates to their own lives and/or the lives of others, thus prompting active and responsible citizenship. On our current CPD day, we focus on the elements and how they can be organically linked to teaching and learning. As we alluded to in an earlier slide, there are 31 learning outcomes within the 3 strands. Our own specification on page 15 states that learning outcomes describe what knowledge, understanding, skills, attitudes, and values students should be able to demonstrate, having studied religious education in junior cycle. As we previously stated, the learning outcomes are represented over 3 years. You may focus on an aspect of an outcome at a point in time. It doesn't have to be fully completed in 1 year, and you can revisit the learning outcome numerous times, showing the incremental nature of the learning outcomes. Numbering of the learning outcomes is only intended to support teacher planning. It does not imply that the outcomes have to be followed sequentially. And the outcomes are interrelated throughout the 3 strands, and therefore a non-linear approach to planning is advised. As a team, we have created a resource to assist teachers engaging with students following the Level 2 learning programme. The Level 2 learning programme covers teaching, learning and assessment for students with general disabilities in the low, mild to high moderate range of abilities in 1st, 2nd and 3rd years of post-primary school. So these students will benefit from a Level 2 learning programme as it purposely focuses on development and learning in areas such as elementary literacy and numeracy, language and communication, mobility and leisure skills, motor coordination and social and physical development. We have a Level 2 learning programme links page online available at jct.ie, and would encourage you to access this online as a guide to planning for students within your classroom who are participating in the Level 2 learning programmes. The richness of the learning outcomes within the RE specification is an opportunity for us as teachers to be able to contextualise the learning. This quote from Michael Aslam states that we do not want our students to learn something just because it's in the curriculum. We need to make the understanding of and connection to the learning purposeful for them. So this is a lovely segue into our next section, where we're now going to reflect on how we can support successful student research to enhance students' learning experiences and make the connection to purposeful learning. I'm now going to pass you over to Ailish and Sligo, who will take you through the next part of this webinar.
Thanks, Niall, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We have received some questions already. One that a few people asked about was where to find the handouts after the webinar. So they will be on the jct.ie RE page under the Resources tab, and you will also find them under CPG material beside the recording of the webinar. We've had a few general queries, just is there any good advice as we begin to start preparing for CBA 1? The best advice is always to look at the RE assessment guidelines, which you will find under key documents on the website. They specifically talk you through CBA preparation. We also focus on that in our current CPD day 2019-2020, and on the website you'll find all that material. You'll find the PowerPoint, and session 2 in particular talks you through how we explained and broke down the process of CBAs and CBA 1 in particular. So that would be a good starting point for your preparation. So do keep the questions coming in. Keith is doing his best to reply to you individually, particularly when they are very school specific and context specific questions. We'll continue now, and we'll come back and have another pause later for questions and answers. We will turn our attention to the action verb research as we aim to create a research-rich classroom. When working with learning outcomes, we need to pay careful consideration to the action verbs. Within each learning outcome, there may in fact be more than one action verb within it. Research itself appears numerous times. It's included in 4 of the 31 learning outcomes. That's 1.11, 2.1, 2.4, and 3.7. It is also a significant component of the first classroom-based assessment that students will complete in second year, because students are asked to research and report on a person of commitment. It is therefore important that we can help our students develop good research skills and foster a research-rich classroom, as the title of this webinar suggests. If you open the GoToWebinar handout panel, you will see handout 1 is a poster of the full list of action verbs outlined in the specification. This includes the 17 found within the learning outcomes, plus all the additional ones that are at the back of the specification in the glossary. You might take a moment now to open this handout, have a look at the action verbs in the ORI specification, and consider if any of these action verbs complement or support research skills. We invite you to share the action verbs that you feel best linked to research in the GoToWebinar question tab now, and we will read out some of your suggestions in a few minutes. As you work on that, I will just mention for those watching a recording of this webinar that the action verb poster we are using is available under the Resources tab on jct.ie or alongside the recording of this webinar. So we're already seeing a great variety of suggestions coming in, lots of action verbs linking to and supporting research. A number of people pointing out examine, investigate, evaluate, reflect and appreciate coming in there. Someone has said actually all of them could link depending on the research being carried out. Absolutely, yes, I would agree with that. In fact, I suppose when we look at those action verbs and when we think about all of the things we associate with research skills, it is evident that we can create lots of opportunities for our students to engage in research and develop research skills through the use of many of the action verbs found in the specification. With that in mind, and to support students' research in ORE, we have designed a poster based around the 3 elements of inquiry, exploration, and reflection and action that underpin the learning outcomes. This is modelled on the research approach for CBAs found in the assessment guidelines. Some of you may have received a copy of this poster at our recent cluster training days, and if not, you can receive a copy of it at future training events. But in the meantime, it is on our website and is available to download and share with your students. Using this poster on our recent days, we've had lots of conversations where teachers have shared with us great ideas about research in the ORE classroom. We're going to pause now to give you the opportunity to share experiences you have had with research in junior cycle ORE. We know it's only our first year doing junior cycle ORE, but if your students have had the opportunity to research so far, please share with us now what types of research your students engaged with. Again, using the questions tab to do this. So we can see ideas coming in. Certainly online research seems to be the most popular one. I'm seeing that coming in a lot. Some people saying they don't have first year ORE, that's absolutely fine. Hopefully you will get lots of good ideas for when you do. People are mentioning different types of research. So some saying they've done individual research with students, and there's also been lots of group projects and students researching together. I see, yeah, it's great to see reading a sacred text has been mentioned. That's a very subject-specific form of research in RE. It's a great skill to give students. A lot of people also mentioning about not just researching, but different projects, different titles of projects they've been doing, and there's great variety of work happening, which is fantastic. People mentioning that students are enjoying presenting their research, which is wonderful to see. And I see some people are saying, yes, they've had the opportunity to visit a local place of worship, which is fantastic. And we will see an example of that a little later. It might be just worth mentioning that there are lots of virtual tours to places of worship, which might be very useful to share with students while they're at home at this time. On our CPD day, the current one for 2019-2020, we virtually visit a Hindu temple. And the link to that is available on our 2019-2020 CPD PowerPoint. We can also share that link again out on our Twitter account. It might be a useful thing to have at this time. So keep those ideas coming in, and thanks for sharing with us. We'll try and compile those ideas into a document that we can share with you at future training events. So we always talk about the power of us learning from each other on our days. So we will share that information. So keep the ideas coming. They're fantastic. We want to draw your attention now to the NCCA Focus on Learning Toolkit series. The full series is available under key documents on the ORI page of jct.ie. We are going to draw from the latest booklet, number 5, on learning outcomes. Within the booklet, you will see religious education is one of the subjects that a sample unit of learning is presented from. This unit of learning focuses on research in the local community. For this unit of learning, 3 of the learning outcomes from the specification are identified. They are 1.2, 1.3, and 3.4. While none of those outcomes contain the action verb research, the sample learning intentions that go with it show that research is going to be a part of the key learning, highlighting that we can provide opportunities for our students to research even when the action verb does not appear in the learning outcomes. And we saw that when we saw how the different action verbs can very much link to research. So in this case, investigate, engage, show an appreciation of, all of that linking to their research skills. As a team, we decided to take this NCCA developed unit of learning and explore it further with our ORI associates. As well as the 4 full-time ORI team members, we are delighted to have 12 ORI associates supporting us. We met in Kildare Education Centre and reflected on this unit of learning from the NCCA together. We decided to examine the richness of the learning outcomes by exploring the local area. To do this, we visited a number of sites that were on the doorstep of Kildare Education Centre. We engaged with different types of research by visiting St. Bridget's Cathedral and monastic city of Kildare. We experienced a virtual reality tour of St. Bridget in Kildare Tourist Centre, and we interviewed the Brigidine sisters. We could see how a unit of learning was going to look very different depending on the location of our schools. And just like the 4 of us, our associates are spread out all over the country. But everyone could identify possible places and people in their locality to research. Reflection is a fundamental part of planning. And as we reflected collaboratively, we continued to build the unit of learning together with our associates. We discussed the many other outcomes that could actually be included here. Suggestions were 1.11, 2.2, 2.10, 3.9, there were many. But we agreed if we just focused on our experience in Kildare, the ones that we could clearly see that we had engaged with were 1.4, 1.6, and 2.1. And upon further reflection, we could also see the link to CBA 1 and CBA 2, where in fact we felt we were preparing with both relevant knowledge and skills through this research. Taking on board this revised unit as a starting point, one of our associates, Roisin, brought it back to her ORI department, where they adapted it for their school context and brought this learning to life with her students. Roisin has kindly agreed to share her experience with us. So we're going to watch a video now of Roisin and her students in action.
We decided to pay a visit to our local Church of Ireland church.
You're very welcome to All Saints Church. Thanks for coming.
But prior to this, we did some online investigation. So basically, I organised that the students would be in the computer room and that we would look up websites that I had researched beforehand to help the students understand more about the Church of Ireland community in our area. The second thing we did was I put up, with the help of another teacher, I opened up a Padlet, and into that we fed questions. And these questions became the basis of our dialogue with Reverend Harvey later on. I was able to download the questions and bring them to class.
How long have you been Reverend, and how long have you trained for?
Predominantly. Yeah, I have how long do you train for as well, so
And each group got to see other questions that the students had asked. We then were able to compile a list of some better questions, more developed, and this list was later shared with Reverend Harvey before we visited him.
Well, the church is named for All Saints, and if you look at the ceiling, you will see, and that's gold leaf, by the way. There are symbols on the saints on the ceiling, so that's why it's called All Saints Church down I want you to look around you because you're standing near some very old glass which was made in the 1600s. I want you to look at these three windows and I want you to use your intuition and tell me which the old glass bits are. And you don't need to know anything about stained glass to work it out.
Is that learning is incremental and can be revisited at any time. So for example, Reverend Harvey is coming back in to talk to us again, and this time we will focus on him as a person of commitment. The students have become co-owners of their own learning. To me, it seems like the burden has been removed from the teacher, and that the teacher is learning with the students, and also assessment is becoming something that is done with the students and not to the students.
Thanks to Roisin, her students, and all in Haywood Community School for sharing their experience with us. I'm going to hand back over to Niall now to bring us through some of the research mentioned there in that video clip in a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Eilish. So through the chat facility and the types of research Eilish called out earlier in the webinar, we can see that research is organically coming to life in classrooms all around the country, which is really refreshing to see. But for the purpose of today, we're just going to focus on three types of research that Roisin has demonstrated throughout the unit of learning within our own school context. So the first type of research we're just going to look at is online research. We're then going to look at visiting a place and interviewing a person. So as you've seen from the short video of Roisin's class, online research was a fundamental part of this unit of learning. So it is, I suppose, important when engaging with online research that we as teachers are cognizant of the school's guidelines and that we communicate them to the students. But it's also imperative that we encourage students to reflect on the validity of their findings when engaging with online resources. So Roisin alluded to that in her presentation, for those of you who didn't hear it, that she had sourced the relevant materials for her students. However, students may also engage with research independently, and making them aware of the validity of their sources is very important. So a tool that can assist students in evaluating their sources is a bookmark that is available to print from our website. This resource has been used already in the science and history professional learning experiences. So some of the students in your school may already be using it. And this bookmark is excellent at helping your students evaluate the reliability of the sources of evidence during a research investigation. And it goes through a number of prompt questions. So I'll just take you through those now. It looks at the credibility of the source by asking them to reflect on who is the author, the accuracy of the source, can the facts and statistics be verified? It looks at the reliability of the source. Does the source present bias? The relevance of it, does the information help them to answer my question? The date, when was this, the information created? And did the author themselves use reliable sources? And finally, does the source help address my question in a comprehensive way? The bookmark also stresses the importance of keeping ongoing research records throughout the research process. And it's a really simple 4 steps to print it and create it on the website. So you can check out all of that in your own professional time. We saw in the video as well that visiting a place is another form of research that really allows the students to incorporate the elements of inquiry, exploration and reflection and action. I think it was very obvious in the video that the students were very engaged, and Roisin's class visited the local Church of Ireland in the locality, and they were given that opportunity to explore the church with a scaffold of questions and a research sheet to accompany them on their journey. Interviewing a person is another effective way to engage with research. Supporting students throughout the interview process is something that we as teachers often need to assist with. So taking that into consideration, we've created a nice little resource here for students when they are preparing for an interview. So there's these guidelines are there to support the research-rich process. Go through 8 clear steps. Accompanying this resource, you will see that we have a more comprehensive document that just explains each step in a little bit more detail. So this gives students, I suppose, an opportunity to reflect and also to get organised for an interview that might take place. William and Thompson talk about 5 key strategies for effective formative assessment. So we're just going to focus in on one of these pillars, which is activating students as learning resources for one another. So often in our classrooms, we can have a very rich input from our students and they can provide great learning for the class around them. So here we're just going to see a student being interviewed who has just received his bar mitzvah. So this student being interviewed by his peers in the classroom, and the peers also research the questions prior to the interview. So I'm just going to set up that video now. It might take a second.
Could you tell me what bar mitzvah is?
It's like a confirmation, but for Jews. It's when a child turns into an adult in Jewish faith.
Brilliant.
How did you prepare for bar mitzvah?
Well, I've been preparing since last year with the counter, and you learn a load of blessings and how to read from the Torah. Well, there is a thing called the tefillin, and you put it, there's 2 of them. One's here, it's like a little box with leather straps, and one's here to the heart, and you wrap around 6 times, and then you wrap around your hand. And then you put the headpiece here, where the roots of your hairs are growing, and then the back, there's like a knot at the back, and it just lays there, and then there's 2 straps. And after you do that and say the blessings, you unwrap the one on your hand, then wrap it around your middle finger, then wrap it here to form 3 lines, which is a shin, which is a letter in the Jewish alphabet.
Could you describe the symbols on the kippah?
Well, this one is a menorah, and that symbols the time where the Romans destroyed the Holy Temple, and they put pigs and stuff which aren't kosher, and there was meant to be, you had to light the menorah, and the only pure olive oil that was left was a tiny little jug that they filled each candle with, and then they lit it, and it lasted for 8 days, which is the miracle of the menorah. And then all this is Jerusalem, the Holy Land.
So if anyone had any difficulties there with hearing the video again, we will ensure that we populate those videos on our website for you to look at there in your professional time. And we do apologize, but we hope you can empathize with our current situation. We're in all corners of the country at the moment. So this is a really wonderful example of the students as learning resources for one another. This student wanted to share this information, and I suppose it's important to remember that not all students will want to share their personal experiences. This interview is one source of information about Judaism that sparked the interest of the students in the class. The questions can be a great starting point for further research, and I suppose it's always important to emphasize the diversity of belief and practices within the major world religions. So that leads us into this, the quote from our own specification on page 11. It says, in using the learning outcomes, teachers should plan for learning that is inclusive, engaging, and generally responds to students' interests and questions. So while students may draw from their own experience in an examination, their personal faith commitment and or affiliation to a particular religious grouping will not be subject to assessment. So the quote we alluded to earlier about connecting the learning is clearly evident from looking at this student being interviewed. It shows the autonomy that we have as teachers in shaping and adjusting the key learning towards the class that we are teaching. So if we explore learning outcome 1.2, which you can see on your screen there from the specification, we can see that students will investigate 2 communities of faith that have a significant presence in their locality or region. So the communities of faith chosen must be associated with 2 of the major 5 world religions studied in the specification. Roisin students had the opportunity to investigate the local Church of Ireland Christian community and the Jewish community. So this is really a prime example of how we as teachers can contextualize the key learning according to our own students. So I'm going to send you back now to Eilish in Sligo just to conclude this evening's webinar. So I'll send over to you there, Eilish.
Thanks, Niall. Our learning intentions for this evening's webinar were to explore how the elements of inquiry, exploration and reflection and action can come to life in the RE classroom, and to develop our understanding of research in the junior cycle religious education specification. Before we conclude, we will have a final check-in with your questions. We were asked if the posters from this evening are available in Irish. They're the new resources that we made especially for this webinar. They are available in Irish. They're already on the website under the Lagan Gaeilge side of jct.ie. Some people asking about the recording of the webinar. So it's going to be under CPD material, and under that tab you'll see elective CPD. That's where you will find the recording of the webinar and the resources that go with it. Micheál will be uploading it for us next week, so I'll take this opportunity now to say thanks to Micheál for all of his technical expertise for this webinar, and to Keith as well for answering your questions, especially those that were context specific. He's been replying and typing back to people all evening. And thank you to Niall for co-facilitating with me this evening. A special thanks again to Roisin, her students, and all in Haywood Community School for sharing their experiences of junior cycle RE with us. If you have any further questions after tonight, or if you're listening to a recording of this webinar, you can email your questions to info@jct.ie, marked for the attention of the RE team. You will also find further support on our website. That's where you'll find the key documents that we've been referring to. You can keep up to date with news and events from the RE team. You will find under CPD workshops all of our material, including this webinar. There are lots of resources to help you in your classroom and in your own professional time. We have assessment support and lots of planning supports and templates there for you. Also on the website, you will see a link to click to sign up to our mailing list. And you can also keep in touch with us on Twitter via the website if you're not on Twitter, because our tweets appear there. But if you're on Twitter, do feel free to follow us. So all that's left for me this evening to say on my own behalf and on behalf of all the RE team, thank you for taking the time to join us. Do keep in touch with us. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you all again in person in the future.